and welcome back to another video on my channel. I do just have to apologize at the beginning of this video because I did make a post saying that last week's video was going to go up, but it was going to go up late, and now this is going to be going up on the Monday. But the reason that happened is because I sat down to film last week to upload the video at the only time that I had to film, and they started having a literal Pearl Jam cover band concert outside of my apartment. So obviously I wanted to see that, but also you could not hear a single thing in this place, so I obviously couldn't film. So yeah, with that all being said, let's get right into today's video. So today I'm going to be covering a true crime case, and I did say in the past that I was not going to be covering cases like this anymore because of the devastation that they cause, and also too, they're just really hard to cover because of how sad they are. But sometimes I come across a case like this and it absolutely just captures my mind, and it's all I can think about. And then in those kinds of cases, I feel like I have to talk about them. So today we are going to be talking about a true crime case. So today we are going to be talking about a 9-year-old boy by the name of Scott Allen Kleeschulte and his disappearance, along with a strange Reddit confession that might have something to do with the young boy's disappearance. Scott was born on April 12th, 1979 and had 4 siblings and was said to be very much a happy kid. One of his favorite things to do was ride his bike along the trails near his home. He lived in a residential neighborhood in St. Charles, Missouri. This area had a lot of greenery, and the kids in the neighborhood would favor playing in the forest, which may seem strange in today's day and age, but that was very much my childhood, and I was born way after Scott, so. Now, along these trails that Scott would ride his bike on, there were all of these tunnels and caves that were previously dug out by other children, and this started in the 60s, and then the trend continued all the way into the 80s when Scott and his family lived there. And this tunnel situation will come into play later on in today's video. The day was June 8th, 1988, and it was the last day of school before summer. That morning was very normal. Scott woke up, he had breakfast while he watched cartoons, then he got ready for school and left out the door and headed towards school. When he got home from school, he ran into the door really quickly, he changed, probably had a snack, and then he left out the door to go and play, which was routine for Scott. He actually went and called on his friend Mike, but his friend wasn't allowed to come out just yet, so he told him that he was going to come and find him later on when he was allowed out. So Scott went on his way, and his sister actually saw him, and she was the last person to see him around 4:30 playing at the top of their street by himself, and he was heading towards West Adams Street down Ken Drive. Something that I want to mention here, because I do think that it is a very important piece of information but is very blurry, is that on that day when Scott went missing, there was a thunderstorm that resulted in a flash flood in that area. However, some sources say that Scott was seen before the flash flood, and some also say that the last time that he was seen was after the flash flooding. So that seems to be unclear, which is pretty weird considering that seems like it would be a very crucial piece of information. But I'm going to go with the fact that he was seen after the flash flood, just because of other things that happen while we talk about this case. What is for certain, however, is that Scott's parents both got stuck at work because of the bad weather conditions, and they didn't get home until around 5:15 p.m. And they just assumed that when they got home, Scott would be there waiting for them, because they had these big dinner plans because it was the last day of school to go out and celebrate. And also Scott was planning on buying these new sneakers that he really wanted, so his parents just assumed that he would be there excited and ready to go. But when they got home, Scott was nowhere to be found. At first, his family just assumed that Scott was at a friend's house playing and that he would come home later. But as time went on, they started to call around asking if anybody had seen him or if anybody knew where he was, and nobody knew where he was. And so this is when the family really started to panic, and around 8 p.m. that night, they called police to report their 9-year-old Scott Kleeschulte missing. Once police were informed, extensive searches of the area went underway, including help from volunteers, the family's neighbors, and people concerned for the young boy's safety. Police brought in bloodhounds who traced Scott's scent for about 5 miles northeast of Fox Hill Road, but the dogs unfortunately lost the scent after that. Another thing that was difficult in this case is because Scott had played outside so frequently, they were unable to determine that if the scent that the dogs had picked up was even from the same day. It could have been from the day prior, because he was also playing outside at that time as well, and so it was really difficult for them to even go on any theory with the scent that the dogs had picked up. The tunnels, Caves and bodies of water in that area were also extensively searched, as Scott loved to play in these areas, just like all of the other kids that grew up there. But even with all of these extensive searches, nothing of Scott was ever found. The searches for Scott were absolutely huge, with officers exhausting every resource that they had in hopes of finding him. Many people stuck to the theory that Scott went out and somehow got hurt and was just never found, but Scott's family said that it was very, very unlike him to go to the trails by himself without his brother or one of his friends. And another thing to note here was that Scott's bike was at his house, which they also said was odd because he would never go to the trails without his bike. And because of all of this, and that there was absolutely no evidence of Scott ever found, this led investigators, as well as many people who researched this case, to believe that Scott was abducted. There would be absolutely no progress in this case whatsoever until 1 year after Scott's disappearance in 1989, when a discovery would be made. A skull was found and pulled out of a pond at the Sun Valley Lake Apartments, which was a set of apartments near to where Scott lived and went missing from. Because of the strange discovery, people thought that this must be Scott and that maybe he had somehow fallen into the pond and drowned. But DNA would prove that the skull was not Scott's, leaving investigators with absolutely zero clues or answers in his case. Again, Scott's case would go completely quiet until 1990, when the bodies of 2 young boys had been discovered just hours after they had gone missing in the same area where it was that Scott had been playing the day that he disappeared. People thought that these cases might be related, however, it would later come out that these boys were murdered by one of the boys' 13-year-old brothers, accompanied by his 10-year-old friend, which is just disgusting, but this had no relation to Scott's case whatsoever. This case only has 2 explanations that could be possible, one in which is that Scott somehow fell and got injured due to the bad conditions of the area from the storm, or again that he was abducted. The abduction theory again is the most highly believed theory in this case, and there were several other abductions in that area of young children around Scott's age that people would keep bringing up, thinking that it was related to Scott's case, and then investigators would investigate these leads and they would come back with nothing leading to any information on Scott. After Scott went missing, there were several other children who vanished from these trails, and more who even ended up murdered, and the majority of these children who were ending up like this were young boys around Scott's age. And because of this, parents just stopped allowing their kids playing at these trails altogether, as it seemed to be something much more sinister was going on out there. Because of this, and to the ease of all of the parents who had children in that area, the trails were completely bulldozed, and I believe that they were turned into a highway. So now we're at the end of the video, and I do want to talk about one other theory that came up in this case, which was what drew me to this case, and that is a confession that was found on Reddit that is possibly believed to be linked to the case of Scott Kleeschulte. So again, this reply was left on Reddit, and it was left on the Ask Reddit subreddit, and the question was, for those people who had accidentally killed somebody, what went wrong? And somebody left a very strange comment back to this person, and I'm going to read their post now. It reads, "This still haunts me to this day. As kids, we had a hideout in the Dirt Cliff Cove. This is the best proximity I can find on Google, only 3 times taller and probably 10 times as wide. There was a neighborhood kid who in hindsight was probably mentally handicapped in some way, but to us, he was just weird, creepy kid. But this was the 80s and we weren't exactly raised PC. 3 of us were headed out to base and found creepy kid sitting at the top in our guard chair. We yelled at him to get out and he said something like, 'Make me,' and started lobbing dirt clumps and sticks down at us. We all ran around the side to make our way up. It gets pretty fuzzy here, but all I remember is he fell. I still remember the sound. When we got back down to check on him, he was in a very awkward position with blood coming out of his mouth. We all just freaked out and ran. And as far as I know, no one has spoken a word of this to anyone. We didn't go back for over a month and never said a word of it between us. Again, this was the 80s, so media wasn't like today. Chances are it got a small article in the local paper. B section, missing mentally disabled child found dead after fall, or something like that. Because of how graphic and detailed this person's post was, people started to look more into his claims, and they went onto his profile and were able to determine that he grew up in the same area of Missouri that Scott Kleeschulte had grown up in. This person also went on in the comments to say that he had later brought this up to his parents in his adult life, and his parents said something along the lines of like, oh yeah, didn't that child go missing, or something like that. Another thing about this that is very, very suspicious is that as soon as people started making the connection from this Reddit post to the case of Scott Kleeschulte, this person completely deleted the post as well as their entire Reddit account. When this person had originally posted this, they shared a photo with the area and where this had happened, and this seemed to have been an area where Scott Kleeschulte was last seen. So it is very possible that this kid somehow was injured and then washed away by the flood, and it is very, very possible that this child was Scott Kleeschulte. I do believe that this Reddit post was sent to the local law enforcement in that area, but nothing has been said about it, and Scott Kleeschulte's case still remains open to this day. These cases are really, really hard to cover, and they really do break my heart, especially when children are involved. Ugh, it's just so horrible. My heart sincerely goes out to the Kleeschulte family and any one of Scott's loved ones, and I really, really, really pray and hope that someday they can get the answers that they're looking for on where their son, brother, and just overall loved one child is. But guys, that is going to bring us to the end of today's video. If you like this video, please give it a big thumbs up. Don't forget to comment down below what you'd like to see in my future videos. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on that notification bell so that you don't miss any future videos from me. Filming this video has been absolutely hectic. I don't know what's going on over there. My camera died. Half of my filming got deleted, so if things look all over the place, that's why. But this is the end of the video, so I think it's okay to be here. But thank you again so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye, guys.